Hi, Linda.
Hi, Nancy.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 8 of the Front Porch Book Club.
The Front Porch Book Club is a podcast that meets 2 times a month.
And we like to dig deep into the relationship between characters and the worlds they live in.
Grab your book and iced tea and join us on our front porch. Today we interview Jennie Cole-Mossman in relation to Where the Crawdads Sing. Jennie is a licensed independent mental health practitioner. She has her master's degree in marriage, family, and child counseling from the University of Southern California. She has expertise in trauma-informed care, reflective practice, and secondary trauma, court, and mental health systems. We invited Jennie to join us on the front porch due to her expertise in parent-child bonding and how bonding is important as we grow.
I know Jennie mostly socially. I know that you have had communications with Jennie professionally. I think this is just going to be really interesting to hear you two licensed mental health counselors discuss all sorts of issues around children, attachment issues, bonding. I'll try to keep up.
Oh, please. I think you'll be just fine. I'm really looking forward to this. I love this book, so I'm interested to hear what Jennie has to say.
Great. Let's get to it. Welcome, Jennie.
Hi.
Hi, Jennie. We're so glad that you could join us. Could you tell us a little bit about what areas of specialty you have in working with children and their families?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am a therapist who, for a large part of my career, has specialized in early childhood mental health and trauma. I started out working in child welfare and then, actually started out working with adults when I did internships. And then I just got younger and younger until I was doing dyadic work with parents and babies, doing child-parent psychotherapy. That's my primary area. The other is probably reflective practice, and that's really just using reflection to work on things like secondary trauma and building insights in people, kind of related.
When you talk about secondary trauma, what does that mean?
So primarily I was using a model out of the Erickson Institute. Dr. Gilkerson had this Fussy Baby Network. So I was interested in it initially from like a parent standpoint. And it started, they had a warm line that parents could call if their babies were crying incessantly or, they're having a really hard time. And they were using this model called the FAN to help them through that time in a very short period of time, regulate that emotion and get them to a place where they could be thinking more clearly and hopefully come out of it. And so with a new insight. And so I was using that as a reflective practice model when we were training child parent psychotherapy or CPP therapists. And then I started doing reflective practice with caseworkers. And then we had some court projects and a couple judges said, can you do this with the attorneys? Because this is really stressful and they're all child welfare. And then I had a couple judges that said, can you do it with us? Because our job is very stressful. So I ended up changing the curriculum a little bit so that they could even use it in the courtroom with parents. Just really learning about mindful self-regulation, how you regulate yourself to be present for a conversation, and how you can help other people get regulated. And then you can think together about what's going on and hopefully have new insights. But it's all attachment-based work. So I loved it because it's all the same thing. It's just applying some of those same principles to our adult conversations.
And so is secondary trauma when someone experiences a trauma because they are somehow exposed to someone else's trauma?
Yes. These would be court personnel and therapists that would be working in child welfare settings where children were abused or neglected. So they're hearing that story over and over again, often having to make decisions based upon the things that they're hearing. And that is really stressful too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, trauma is what this book is. We've got attachment issues. We've got a dysfunctional family.
Yep.
We've got trying to figure things out on her own because she can't trust any adults around her. And then we've got this mix of this. Well, I need somebody to help me figure out how to interpret the world. So I'll use the animals and biology to figure it out.
Yeah.
As you read this book, it's kind of hard to know where to start. Like the issues of attachment, dysfunction, that's a big part of your work that you've been doing. What were your thoughts on the book and this little Kaya?
Ironically, when I read the book, I thought, well, this will be a good book to keep my mind off my work. And so it didn't even cross my mind, like, until Nancy emailed me and I was like, oh my gosh, like this whole book was about the work I was doing. And I mean, that is secondary trauma at play, right? Like I didn't even have,
that is secondary trauma.
I was just reading it, having no emotional reaction to these things and thinking, wow, this is a really good story. I really like this book and I am really drawn to it. And then when Nancy emailed me, I thought, well, no wonder you were really drawn to it. It's all your work, like all rolled up into one.
Yeah.
Thanks for connecting those dots for me.
Now, what did you really think of the book?
Yeah. I mean, but I did when I went back, like, I had to go through and think about the characters again. And even, I mean, there was a child welfare worker in the book,
yes,
to check on her and how afraid she was of the worker and hiding. It was like a truancy officer and hiding from her. And as I remember it, that woman being very well-intentioned, but also scaring her and having some other adults help her evade that, being made fun of at school and all those things. So that part was really interesting. But her early childhood strikes me when I look back at it.
What strikes you?
Well, initially, when I was trying to recollect this, I started thinking she lived in the woods all by herself. But they really don't talk about her birth to 5 other than, like, at the beginning, there's this snippet about Ma, and she's kind of idealized. I mean, she's this warm sanctuary for her that I think later on the marsh becomes almost like her womb. It's like she's encased in this area that makes her feel safe and secure. Now I wish that there was like a sequel where it was talking about her and Ma and Pa in her early years, because I don't think we got a ton of that in this book.
Do you see with children that are in child custody an idealization of their biological parents?
I think sometimes, this is an interesting question for me too, because I have 3 adopted children that were adopted at birth.
Oh, okay.
My kids didn't know that anybody was born any differently. So, they're like, that's what happens. You just get a sister. She just shows up at your house and your therapist mom explains it to you with too many words, and, and they just show up. And, the kids that I saw, I was all doing reunification work. So I would have been working with, it's why I switched from doing play therapy straight to child parent psychotherapy, because it was more dyadic. And there's other kinds of play therapy that are more dyadic, but I did have this feeling that I spent the time in trauma processing with these kids, and I became the person that they learned that will not become overwhelmed and can in fact help them feel safe again. And I'm temporary. So like that was a bad thing to have this transient figure in your life be the one person that you've had this kind of corrective experience with. So I started doing child parent psychotherapy because I then got to be and we call it the conduit between the parent and child as they do that work, because the parent probably didn't have that kind of attachment. And so they're learning right along with the child what the child needs and trying to give it to them. And the child's never experienced the parent in that way. And so they are reacting as they might, and just being in the middle of that and helping to bring that together was really satisfying. That really was a big change in my work.
You work with children who are in state custody. How do you think the story would have been different if some of the outside agencies, such as the school and Child Protective Services, would have gotten involved in her life? Or during this time period in the 50s and 60s, did we even understand how to work with children who were experiencing this kind of trauma?
And I don't know. I think we probably didn't know as much as we know now about brain science and the impact of attachment on development. And, when I think back to reading the book, certainly I would never want a 5-year-old to be raising themselves in a swamp. Like I never would have written in a court order, Kaya is fine raising herself. That's fine. But she does have, I started thinking back to this. If I was treating her and if I was thinking about her, she does, those first 5 years are so important. And she had an initial attachment. She had Ma. And she has somewhat of a secondary attachment with Pa. He's a little disengaged in the beginning, but he's pretty idealized, and she's disillusioned by that. And she's got Jody. Like they had this intact family unit. But then when you start getting more into the book, you learn that Ma was very depressed. And so like those would tend to be mothers that I would see that had depression and had used substances, and those things were untreated. And their ability to have really secure and stable attachments it just wasn't there, and it needed work. But the kids couldn't really describe that at 2 and 3, describing that, So I guess when Linda said, would they idealize? I think a little bit, just because you don't know. You don't often have the language to describe that. So you just have a feeling. Kids that I worked with that experienced trauma used to always talk about their implicit memories and their explicit memories of things. And that even before the age of 2, there is this implicit memory of smells and feelings and these sensory memories. And now that I'm saying that, even I'm thinking about the book, she has that with food for sure. There's a lot of sensory description of those things, which are memories of her mother. And those memories made her feel safe and secure. Attachment is the ability to provide safety and security when a child is distressed and to resolve that distress. And Ma did that for many years for her. But then she has all of this trauma. She has the loss of her mother. She's got the loss of her father. She's got the loss of Jody. She's raising herself. So I was thinking when I was getting ready for this, what would she be like if she hadn't had that first 5 years? She didn't have that sensory memory and wasn't able to bring herself to a place where she can make herself self-regulate and make herself feel safe and secure with the cooking or some of the other things in the marsh that brought her back to that initial feeling that things were going to be okay.
At what age is it important for children to be able to have established good attachment to others?
So it begins 6 to 9 months, kids start to form attachment. Prior to that, they might have a primary caregiver or a person who's their favorite or that they have a preference for. But really, after 6 to 9 months, that's the time when we start to pick who our person is.
Really?
Yeah. Shortly after that, like at 10 months, I think is when you move into multiple attachments. So it's starting very young. But if you think about all the things you need when you're 9 months, you're completely and totally dependent on your caregiver. So picking your person makes a lot of sense biologically to me. You're making sure that that person is responding to you and knows what to do. And both of your biologies are making sure that that happens. And babies do all sorts of things that make us do all sorts of things. I remember one of my coworkers had a baby, and I found myself like walking up and down the hallway in the middle of the day, bouncing her baby while she was talking. And what am I doing? Why am I acting like this? And what would I ever be acting like this without a baby in my hands? No way. I would never be bouncing up and down the hallway and talking in motherese and all those things. But babies make you do that. You respond to their cues. That's why I wish I knew what that time with Ma was. I can only guess from reading the description and the way she regulates with it that that was a fairly decent attachment. Like I said, later on, when we get into the book later and we've realized how depressed Ma was, I wonder if she was able to respond in some of the ways that she can. But it would be very unlikely for you to see a child who could be as self-assured as she is and as regulated as she is if they didn't have a secure attachment, because she's a little girl who has serious confidence in herself. She has to survive.
My memory of that book is that Ma had left before and had always come back.
Yeah.
So that wasn't like the first time she had left.
I mean, and that's the attachment, like the lesson, right? You start to play peekaboo with kids, and then before they have object permanence, they're like, holy cow, that person totally disappeared. Or my kids watch TikTok all the time, and it was a big theme for a while that you hold a blanket up and then you drop the blanket and your dog doesn't know where you're at.
Oh,
You've disappeared for them. But when babies get a little older, they know you're coming back. They know that when you leave, you'll come back. And each time they're distressed and you come back and soothe, they're learning, I can tolerate without you just a little bit longer. I can make myself okay just a little bit longer. Except for then she really is dealt this blow by losing her mother and not being able to have that safe space anymore.
So how does the fact that the father is abusive, he's an alcoholic, he flies into rages, he abuses Ma and also the kids, how does that impact a child's ability to form attachments? Is it just the attachment with the father in that case, or does that impact possible attachment with others?
I'm sure it impacts her attachment with Ma too. I think all of those things that go on with Pa, that unpredictable behavior, again, if what you're looking for is fright with resolution, being uncomfortable with comfort, if you're pairing those things together so that you learn that, then Pa is that unpredictable behavior is the undoing somewhat of that, where you're unsure. You just don't know what's going to come next. And you could be really upset one day and then there's nobody there. And that's who Pa is for her. He leaves and doesn't come back. I think that's who he represents. And all of those lists of things are these risk factors for insecurity and attachment and disorganization and attachment, because he isn't the solution. She's not learning, when I need you, you'll be there. You know how to read my cues and do the things that I need you to do. He's teaching the opposite.
Right. Well, she overcomes a lot.
Yeah.
There's hope, obviously, that just because you're raised a certain way doesn't mean that you're going to continue that cycle or that things can't get better for you. So kids can survive. She overcomes a lot of the dysfunction in her raising, and she does bond with other people as she grows. Several characters. So there's hope. In what ways do you think we can strengthen the systems around families, around children, to better support?
That, to me, over my years of work before, the work that I do now is technical assistance. So helping other people implement programming to help parents who use substances and their kids might also be some kind of a victim of crime is the $1 million question. How do you wrap hope around that? How do you give people things that they never had? It is one of those things I loved about therapeutic modalities like child parent psychotherapy, where they're together, because I think it is really hard if you're a parent anyway. I mean, it's just hard because babies are hard. There's frailty in babies, and then on top of it, to not have had secure attachments themselves, or to have mental health or substance issues, it would be so hard to give a baby what they need. And so, like in the book, Jumpin and Mabel are some of my favorites, because it doesn't take much from them.
Yes.
Like, it's just a touch base for her to believe that she can take care of herself. They kind of keep going, that confidence that she has that the world is an okay place and I can take care of myself, even though she's not really bringing them things that they can sell. And I think of all of the things, you know, as a mom, that you stash
Right.
that your kids give you. This is the best Mother's Day, fill in the blank, thing you painted, card, or whatever, because you do want to instill in them that you love their creativity or you love the way they're showing you. And Mabel and Jumpin do that for her. She has several people that they see a spark in her and they really are there to nurture that with her writing and her drawings. And I think we need a lot more of that. I wish I was the kind of person that went over and offered to hold a baby and what have you, because I do think we need more of that. So my kids are 9 months apart, my two oldest, and then a year apart. So like right now they're 17, 16, and almost 15. And when they were kids and we'd go to Target, I just was hoping the doors were locked or something. Crazy. And there'd be people that, you know, would walk by you and say things like, this is going to be okay. My kids did that. I was well resourced and that is my field, and still felt like just such a failure some days. So I can't even touch the insecurity that some people might have about parenting. I think we need a lot more of that, and more supporting people rather than pointing out people's foibles and flaws and not doing anything to raise them up.
Yeah, because the town was not supportive at all of her. We had Mabel and Jumpin. That was about it. None of the other townspeople were supportive or helpful.
And couldn't see what a genius she was. You know, I think like the missed opportunities that people had, her writing was such a gift that you don't really know about it until the end. But they were enough, you know, they were enough to keep her going. They weren't enough to keep her out of relationships that weren't very healthy. And I think that is the part for me where I saw some of that early introduction to not having her father be stable or supportive and not having any good relationships, really. I mean, when I was looking back, I was like thinking, how does she see men in her life other than Tate, the fishing boy, I call him?
Yeah.
I'm such a sportswoman. Other than him, like, it's all bad experience. I mean, she has some touchy moments, I think, with her dad and wants there to be more, but it's that inconsistency in it that he's not predictably going to be there for her. He doesn't predictably believe in her. And really those moments, if I remember correctly, that are good, it's her taking care of him, not him taking care of her. So that's where I see the insecurity maybe in some of her secondary attachments.
What factors do you see in your practice that help children overcome, probably not specifically this kind of trauma and abuse?
Right. Hopefully not.
Yeah, exactly. How can we as a society support those practices?
I really like a wrap around kids, but I also like things that aren't transient. I have done clinical work for a while, but I occasionally, because of social media, kids will reach out to me. And I think I did not know it at the time because I didn't have kids during the early part of my practice, but me resolving their trauma was a significant thing for them. And then I was gone, you know, like, so those pieces of therapy, and now like most of the evidence-based therapies that you do for trauma have a caregiver or a parent present because they have to be the coach for the rest of life. When you get scared and you remember those things, you got to have an adult coach who's there to say, we can get through this. You aren't doing this alone, and helping them regulate and just being present. I like that. I like those components. And then, you know, all the jump-ins that kids need in their lives.
Yeah.
They need them. They need teachers that believe in them. They need someone that sees their special talent and nobody else does. And I'm raising 3 teenagers, so their friends have a lot of bad ideas. Teenagers just have a lot of bad ideas. So, I feel like they should be wrapped with bubble wrap of good supported adults because they're like bubble wrapped right now 24/7 with social media of people who don't have fully developed brains telling them how things are going to be and what good things they should do. And let's go do this.
Yeah.
But they're not bubble wrapped with adults saying, hey, you don't need to be doing those things. I will love you always, and other people will love you and care about you, and you can still be special without engaging in all of the dangerous things in the world. I think we need more of that, like more, and I don't even want to call them informal supports because that sounds so child welfare-y. But I do think we need more people. You know, we did foster care, and I still talk to the little girl that was in foster care at my house. She's a grown adult. So I think when you engage in a child, at least for me, you're doing it forever. When you start that relationship with a kid, they should always be able to come back and know you're there. I know that's not always possible, but that would be my ideal.
Right, that's the attachment and the bond that they have.
Yeah.
It goes both ways too.
Yeah.
You know, when you bond with a little one and you feel like you know that person,
Yeah.
it doesn't take long. It just, there you have it, that attachment with somebody.
Yeah.
Jennie, we really enjoyed having you. This was such an interesting book to read, and talking with you and your expertise about it was really interesting.
I feel like after hearing you two talk about it, 2 people who really know a lot about mental health issues, that Delia must have done a lot of research to understand these issues around attachment, because it sounds like she really nailed a lot of the issues that would come up. Do you think?
Like I said, I was trying to read this as like a fiction book and realized now that I wasn't reading fiction books at all. You know, and I think it's one of those things where you can understand relationships really well and not know that that's attachment, but you just understand human beings really well, that human beings need other human beings who love and care for them and make them feel like they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that the world is a safe place. And that is the simplest thing in the world and the most difficult thing to carry out. She must have known a lot about that to write that book.
Yeah. Well said.
What's the best way for people to touch base with you?
You can email me. It's jcmossman30@yahoo.com.
Okay.
And then obviously I'm on social media because a lot of kids that I used to treat find me on social media. That to me, though, says something like, well, like as a therapist, you know, you worry about your boundaries a little bit, but a part of my heart is touched because I think you have a positive memory of me being part of your healing. And I'm so honored that they would even include me in that category at all. That makes me happy. And it's nice to see that a lot of them have turned out to be happy adults in relationships and have their own kids. And that makes me feel just like it does when I see my own kids and they're doing well. That just kind of makes your heart swell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must be so gratifying.
Yeah. It is the ups and downs, though, of that make this so hard, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's never just everything's going great. There's always nail-biting times as a parent.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on the front porch to talk about this book. It was so interesting to hear your insights given your background.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay. Well, that was Jennie. Oh my goodness. Where the Crawdads Sing. A book I love, topics that I'm passionate about, trauma, bonding, people becoming whole through moving from victim to survivor. Enjoyed the book, enjoyed meeting with Jennie. Nancy, what were your thoughts on having Jennie and what she said?
Well, I thought it was just really interesting to hear about the importance of attachment, even as young as 6 or 9 months, that we are already forming attachments. We're learning how to trust people in our lives, how important stability is. But I also liked what she had to say, that it's important that we have that not just from primary caregivers, but also the importance of other people in our lives and how they can play a really beneficial role, whether or not we have really healthy attachment with primary caregivers or not, is kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, we all need to be more like Jumpin and Mabel.
Yeah.
You know, we gotta have the village of people around other people, and to create a healthier society. One takeaway of many. That's probably an oversimplification, but I like that. Well, you know, next time on the front porch, we are going to be reviewing The Legacy, written by Mark Snyder Jr. You can download that on the Kindle, but we hope you pick that up. This is a very different book that we have had so far. This is a mystery fantasy type of book.
I'm looking forward to reading it. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds, really different from what we've read.
Oh, we just do so many different things on this podcast. That one just sets us off in a totally different direction. You can get in touch with us by going to our website at frontporchbookclub.com. You can post comments, make suggestions for books for us to discuss. You can check out what we're going to be discussing in the future, so you can start reading now, like Mark's book. Start reading that one now. You can post any questions you'd like us to ask Mark or any of the other books that we have coming up.
So our episodes come out twice a month, on the first and third Wednesday of every month. On the first Wednesday, Linda and I discuss the book, and on the third Wednesday, we bring in an author or expert. And Mark actually is going to be joining us next month. So that'll be fun to have the author join us, and we'll have probably lots of questions for him about what he was thinking as he wrote this book. If you like this show, be sure to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and invite your friends to join us on the front porch.
I know that Mark is into prairie dogs. Maybe he'll have a prairie dog he can bring on our front porch. I don't know.
Oh, perfect.
Well, anyway, I'll see you next time, Nance, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.